What happens when a director forgets that you make a movie for the audience you have, not the audience you want? Let's talk about Joker 2, Folie A Deux.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back. Today, we're going to be discussing Joker 2. Before we get into the main discussion, we're here to give you guys movie recommendations. So, guys, best recent thing we've seen.
Mine is not a movie, but a TV series. One that you actually recommended, but I forgot you recommended, and then someone else mentioned it to me, and I thought I'd check out, and that's From, the TV series. And as a quick sort of like reminder, it's about this little town where these people have somehow found themselves stuck in this little town where they can't escape. And then there's these ghosts that are terrorizing them at nighttime. And during the day it's all fine, but at nighttime they can't step outside because if they step outside, then they'll be killed. And they have these like talismans in the house which prevents the ghosts from coming in. But it's a situation of if you leave the door slightly ajar, you leave a small window open for the ghosts to get into the house, then they fully exploit it, and then you and pretty much everyone else in that house is essentially dead, basically. So it's about the people living in this town trying to kind of just like figure out life, and obviously also figure out how they get themselves back home. And I went from never watching the series to being fully caught up to season 3 in the latest episode in about 2 or 3 days, because it was just so good. It was just like super intriguing, like the mystery behind it was just like all fascinating. Like the different like kind of like subplots that were going on were all like super fascinating about this. I am concerned where it's going in season 3. I kind of feel like it's starting to lose a little bit the magic that it had, and I feel like it's starting to introduce too many different mysteries that aren't being answered or aren't being solved in the series. So I'm a little bit concerned about season 3, but the first 2 seasons of this was just great. It was just like great TV, one of the best series that I've watched in the past couple of years. So can't fault it, apart from season 3 and the direction it's heading in.
I heard that it's a quite slow burn where the mystery never goes anywhere, but that's not the case in the first 2 seasons.
There are like elements of the mystery that doesn't go anywhere, but because there's like so much happening, and there's a lot that you're still like kind of like uncovering and understanding, you can kind of forgive it in the first 2 seasons. But by the 3rd season, where you're getting rinse and repeat of like things not being resolved, and they keep introducing new things, you kind of start to get a little bit like tired of it, and you kind of start to question which direction they're kind of going in, and question whether they're going to stick the landing when it comes time to eventually ending the show.
It's definitely, I was surprised that you liked it, because it's definitely a slow burn, and I love season 1 and season 2. Season 3, I will agree, it feels like it's getting a bit convoluted, even though I've just watched the first episode of season 3, but still it feels like there's a lot happening. It's like it feels to me like there's gonna be a season 4, because like there's just so much happening. It just doesn't feel like they're gonna finish this in pretty much 1 season. You know what I'm saying? So
it wouldn't be the first time that a show like this piles on the mysteries and then just ends and never resolves them.
I feel like Lost is definitely was definitely one.
That's one of them, but there are others. Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a good series, John. You should check it out when you have free time. It's definitely a good series.
I was gonna say, it might frustrate Daniel a little bit, but go ahead.
Yeah, actually might.
I just like punchy stories that get to the point.
It starts off pretty good though. I'm not gonna lie to you, it starts off pretty good.
I don't know how people say it's a slow burn, because I was on board from episode 1. Like I was all in on it.
I think there's different things that contribute, especially when it comes to the acting, especially like from the mother. She feels it just feels so slow. I'll be honest with you, like the way that she acts feels so slow. I think that's just how, because it kind of reminds me of Fear the Walking Dead. Like Fear the Walking Dead, for me, I found it boring at first, but then that's because it was just a slow burner, and there's obviously other factors to it besides the acting. But I think a component of why From is a slow burner is because it's very dialogue-y. So best recent thing I've seen is BBC One series called Kin. Pretty much simple. It's about a Dublin crime family going through gangland wars. It's a fun one. I think what makes it fun is it's obviously how impossible the wars that they get into feel, especially the war that and also like the war that's brewing within their own family as well. So yeah, that's definitely one that I would recommend. I don't think it's not complex. It's pretty straightforward. Like when it comes to other crime series, like gangland type of mob type of series, pretty straightforward, pretty simple, pretty similar. But I just think just the impossible challenges and like just the internal beef is what makes it pretty exciting. So I'd recommend there's 2 seasons.
So the best thing I watched last week, for one, I'm still working my way through The Penguin, and so far it's just been getting better and better. That's not my pick this week. My pick is Weird, the Al Yankovic story. Okay, which of you know Weird Al Yankovic?
I've heard of it. It's got Harry Potter, Daniel Radcliffe as the actor in it. Yeah, I've heard of it. I've not watched it.
But you don't know Weird Al?
No.
Weird Al is one of the best musical comedians to have ever worked. Like, he's been doing musical parody for 40 years, and this is essentially his life story, but it's also a parody of biopics. So it essentially recounts the way he got into music and into musical parody, but it also kind of lampoons all the different tropes and cliches that you find in biopics. So those two things are kind of happening at the same time, and like it's full of great actors, and it's full of like it's probably one of the funniest things I've seen in a while. Like movies that actually make me laugh out loud are pretty rare in recent years, and this one did that very quickly. It takes its silliness completely seriously, which is what you're supposed to do, and it's very smart and very funny, and it just gets better if you know Weird Al's history and life story. But I think even if you don't, you can still enjoy it as a really good satire of biopics.
How did it get you to first play? Because I know you don't like biopics. So did you know that going into sort of watching the movie?
I like Weird Al. That's why.
Okay,
so
fair.
I've been listening to that guy's music since the 2000s, and when I heard that it wasn't just a biopic but actually a satire as well, that's where I really got interested. I think if you just did a straight biopic of his life, I wouldn't have watched it. But just the amount of talent that's involved in this and the reputation it has for how funny it is, that's what got me to check it out. And like in the first half hour or so, I was mildly interested, and then suddenly I realized I was on a roller coaster and forgot to put my seatbelt on. And it's just wonderful. It's like one of the best comedies in years.
Oh boy, here we go. The main event. Daniel, can you please let the people know what the hell we're going to be discussing?
So Joker Folie A Deux is the sequel to 2019's Joker, which picks up after the events of that movie where Arthur Fleck, also known as the Joker, finds himself in prison for the events of the first movie, and he finds himself on trial. And the movie essentially deals with the ramifications of his actions and how his trial unfolds, and the cult of personality that's grown around him that is supporting him from the outside, essentially. And that is essentially the gist of the plot. So what did we think of Joker Folie A Deux?
Okay, you know what? I'm going to start off with an interesting approach. These two can vouch for me that I actually had a mental breakdown after I came on the cinema. So just because I'm going to start off with a different approach, which is going to be a positive approach, this film had shades of greatness. What I mean by that is it had moments where it could have been a great movie. It had moments where it was what made the first movie so great would have made this great if they followed it. Even though they abandoned what works for the first movie and the second movie, like I said, shade like moments which were like really good. For example, the scene between like the interaction between what's his name, Arthur and Jackie Sullivan, one of the prison guards. Their whole interaction for me, I found was like one of the most entertaining and one of the most intense moments in the film. Where I was like, I just want to see more. Also, another moment was Arthur and what's his name, Ruddy.
Gary
My bad, I
Prudence.
said Rud. Yeah, my bad. Yeah, but that whole scene when they're in court, that scene there was probably one of the best scenes. But yeah, so like I said, it had shades of greatness. However, for all you people out there that keep on saying Joker 2 isn't about Arthur, isn't about the Joker, it's about Arthur. You don't understand this was a masterpiece. No. It's not that we don't understand what the film was about. I understand that this movie was about Arthur. It's just that I didn't like it. I did not. It hurt me, bro. I'll be honest with you guys. This movie literally hurt me. Like these two can vouch. Like this movie, because for me, Joker 1's top 5 films of all time. all time. Top 5. I don't know where on the list, but it's top 5. So to see Joker 2, like I said, just to see Arthur's fantasy world being portrayed in a musical, I honestly want to understand the thought process and the decision behind that choice by the creators behind this movie. So Todd Phillips, my guy, you need to come out of hiding and you need to let us know what one. I'm not even gonna listen. I understand that obviously in terms of like everyone's got different creative vision, it's subjective, everyone approach. I'm not going to completely I'm not going to completely gun down the creators of this movie. I'm just going to gun down the project itself and how it made me feel, even though they are behind the creation of this movie. But how this movie made me feel, bro, I felt hurt, man. I felt betrayed. I don't understand. It felt like a slap in my face, bro. I'll be honest with you. Like, I just don't get why he turned this into a musical. People's argument was, oh, people aren't angry that this is a musical. They're angry that it just pretty much everything that made Joker 1 so great wasn't in Joker 2. Cool. That's them people. I agree with that too. But for me, I am one of those people that didn't like it because it was a musical. I understand that it was a unique portrayal of okay, the first in the Joker 1, the way that his pretty much fantasy was portrayed was through imagination and him making up characters, right? Like him making up fantasies with the people he's surrounded by. Cool. And they did the same thing, but in a different way for a musical. Just for me, it didn't work. It didn't work. Quite frankly, I think it made nail biting moments fall flat and it felt very monotone. Like at the end of each scene, like I'll probably say 60% of the time is a musical. At the end of each scene, which I said were nail biting moments, they came a musical. And people kept on saying that the musical, it was in relation to what was going on. I hear it, but it felt redundant. Like you didn't need to convey how they were feeling in that scene with a musical. Like you could have did it sometimes. I wouldn't have been mad if it was like 3 big musicals in 3 big parts in Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. I wouldn't be mad at that. But every scene was a flipping musical, bro. And I was just so annoyed. I was literally in the cinema and I even heard people like, oh, even from the trailer, it doesn't seem like it's a musical. Honestly. So if it was a musical, sell to us that it's a musical. And apparently Todd Phillips and Lady Gaga, there was an interview or something where they were saying how, they were pretty much trying to not convince us, but they were telling us that it wasn't really a musical in a way, but it was a musical, but it wasn't like like the musical scenes wasn't like the big part of the film. So I'm just annoyed that it was falsely advertised to us, and I'm just annoyed that they just added a musical to a film about pretty much a psychopath, and obviously the psychology of a psychopath. I don't think, for me personally, I don't think I'm saying that subject matter should, I'm saying, go with a musical.
As a short, non-spoilery review, this was very frustrating to watch. This was incredibly frustrating to watch, largely because I love the first movie so much, and I love the character of the Joker so much that you just want it to be great, and it just like fell flat in so many places. I know like everyone like talks about like the musical aspect of it. Genuinely, it felt like it was just getting in the way of the movie. It was getting in the way of a potentially kind of good story that was almost there in this movie. Like in we'll kind of get into it in the spoiler section. Some of these examples of it. There were parts of it like that did work. There were part of the musicals that kind of like did work, but they were like so like few and far between, and it felt like every other scene was some type of musical kind of going on. The other thing that was like really frustrating was that we just didn't get enough Joker action, for me anyways, in this movie, especially like it being titled The Joker. Like I just wanted to see more of him. And then when he did show up, it was in this kind of like courtroom drama, which again just wasn't interesting at all. And then the whole like courtroom drama went to kind of like the Joker then shows up there. It just wasn't handled well. And I kind of understand what they were trying to do in terms of showing the negative impact of this Joker persona and its effect on other people. And I feel like there was like kind of like great moments, like you mentioned there, look, with Gary in the courtroom scene. That's probably one of the highlights of the movie was that particular interaction there. But I just feel like they could have for where we've like left off the Joker in the first movie, where he's kind of battled against the corruption. He's battled against it's essentially like the elitist society in the first movie. He's kind of like built up this like huge following in this and the other, and then where we kind of like pick up with him in this movie, it just I don't know. It was just like frustrating, and again, I understand what they were trying to do, but it's just like it's not what we wanted to see. It's not what we were kind of going into this movie kind of expecting to see, essentially. So yeah, more of my thoughts are going to come in the spoiler section. I think Joaquin Phoenix as a joke, as like Arthur Fleck and sort of the Joker is always sort of a quality. He's like, really good actor. He sort of did the best with what he sort of was given to work with in this particular movie. But yeah, this was just not.
But
It wasn't it for me. I'll say I'll leave it at that for now until we get to
so
the more meat of things.
just to
Go on.
quickly interject, sorry, Daniel, just quickly. I agree. I think also like also the point I made about Shades of Greatness, I think individual performances was like you can't argue that it wasn't bad because individual performances was definitely a highlight of the film. So when it comes to the performance, it's great. I don't agree with some people saying that Lady Gaga's performance was terrible. I don't agree with that at all. I just think the material that she was given, like what else could she do? I think she performed the arse off. I think she did great. It's just that she was put in a bad movie, and that's pretty much the kind of rep that she gets. Like she gets is like, damn, she's a good actor, but she's just put in bad movies. I haven't seen other Lady Gaga movies, but in this one, I think she performed quite well. Joaquin Phoenix, yeah, I think of course, he does what he does. He's amazing, anyways. So I think he did his job. It's just they were just given bad material, man. I'm sorry to interject, Daniel. Your time.
So, unlike the two of you, I have not seen Joker 1. I stayed away from it 5 years ago because I was so turned off by the discourse surrounding it, how it had kind of turned into this proxy war in culture war nonsense. And I've stayed away from it since then. So I've still not seen it. I didn't watch it in preparation for this. So I kind of went into this as kind of an impartial observer a little bit. So I was not part of the target audience, and I was also not part of the people who were on the other side of that. So from that very Swiss approach, what I basically observed was that people are very wrong about what this kind of movie is. People are calling it a musical, and it's not really one in the way you think. What happens is that that whenever the Joker has a traumatic episode, he kind of retreats into a fantasy world, and that is represented by singing. And that is very clearly what it is, and it is not what you think of when you hear it's a musical, right? And I think a lot of people have not calibrated their expectations accordingly because they either were shocked that it was a musical or did not like that it was a musical, but actually it's not really that. Second of all, it's not phoned in, it's not trash, it's not an incoherent movie. This is a very good movie, one of the better ones I've seen this year from a technical standpoint. The directions, the cinematography, the acting, the writing, there's foreshadowing and symbolism, and everything about it is very deliberate. So this is not a cash in, this is not a phoned in, this is very much a passion project for the people involved in this, specifically Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix, and we should judge it according to that. So this is not just a trash movie. That's exactly what the people involved wanted to make, and you can have whatever reaction you want to that, but it is not a trash movie. And third of all, this movie is very much an apology. And it is an apology for the kinds of success that the first movie had to the people who don't like the sorts of people who like the first movie. That's what this is. The entire movie, without going into the plot of it, I think the plot is actually irrelevant and there's not a lot of it. And there's one of the criticisms that exists of this movie that is that the plot is kind of thin and weak. And you need to realize that this entire thing is a humiliation ritual. It is humiliating Arthur Fleck because he stands for the audience, and the writer and the people involved in this are trying to apologize to their peers for having made a movie that was too successful with the wrong people. This is why this is happening. And the entire movie is an attempt to burn this to the ground so that stops. And I don't know how they've been viewed by their peers since then, but I imagine the point of this is to get them kind of in good standing with the people they want to be in good standing with, and they're embarrassed for the success they had and the audience they have, and so they're burning that to the ground, and this is what this movie is. Let's discuss.
I hear what you're saying, Daniel, but I would have to disagree, man. This, for me, this was a bad movie, man. I wouldn't say it was. I even called it trash. I'm maybe gonna go back to what I said. This movie was bad, man.
There's a difference between a bad movie and a movie that's not what you like.
I'd prefer to watch Night Swim than this. Personally, for me, I'd prefer to watch Night Swim to this, and I get it. Like, I understand. Don't get twisted. Like, for me, I felt like even though there was a story, I felt like there wasn't a story. Like, for me, it was just like, okay, it's Arthur's trial. And yeah, I do agree. Like, that was the argument as well that was going on social media in terms of like trying to rectify a mistake, right? In terms of like what Joker won and who it appealed to, they were trying to rectify a mistake with this one. Cool, fine, but I still think you didn't need to repackage that into a musical. Like, keep the same packaging. Like, I understand that so I get that his trauma and obviously the triggers of his trauma was being conveyed as a musical. I understand that, but that obviously that wasn't done in the first movie, right? And in the first movie, the way that his trauma and obviously when he entered the fantasy land, the way that was conveyed was pretty much through imagination, right? And making scenarios up in his head. That worked. So I understand that he wants to try something new and that's his creative vision, cool, but his creative vision didn't work. Do you know what I'm saying? And a lot of people, I feel like his audience for this movie, a lot of them, you could argue, don't like musicals. So why would you create, like, why would you, I get that's your creative vision, but why would you go that
That
route?
question answers itself. It's because the people who will show up for this movie will not like it. That's why.
So pretty much he wanted to sabotage himself.
Yes. That's the whole thing.
Remind me of this like big controversy from the first movie, because I remember it happening, but I remember just like not paying attention.
It appeals to right-wing incels. That's why.
But like when a movie makes $1 billion and has an overall positive sort of audience score, I feel like the audience there is diverse enough for it to not all be right-wing incels, because
Yeah.
I don't.
That was very clearly the discourse surrounding it, right? That's what people were afraid of riots in the theater because the basement dwellers would come to see this movie.
None of that happened.
Like that's what was happening.
Was it,
Like,
did any of that?
So let me rephrase. None of that happened, but that is what people were talking about.
Yeah, but none of that happened, and I feel like.
Sure.
I feel like it was just like with like a lot of like the stuff and the debates that happen online. Like the reason I ignore it is because it's just people that are just like spewing crap about what's popular at the time, and no one really cares, and no one really truly believes some of the stuff that they're saying online, which is why I kind of like ignore it completely, and that's why it like really frustrates me that this movie is trying to undo what the first movie did, because once the movie kind of came and went, the conversation around it completely died down. The people that loved the movie, like myself, loved it because it was a great story. It was a great sort of kind of like tragic telling of sort of Arthur Fleck, and sort of how someone like him could essentially become the Joker and sort of become sort of this figure essentially. And we loved it because of that, not because of like sort of what potential like kind of like riots or like sort of conversations it could have like stirred online. So that's where a lot of the frustrations come from. And then saying that and kind of going into this sort of movie with sort of part of like some of the knowledge of sort of impacting the story and impacting sort of the story that they wanted to tell in this. Again, I don't feel like it was sort of done completely well, because this is meant to like what they could have painted it as was like the rise and fall of sort of the Joker, and it is kind of that, but in the sense of sort of he's kind of like garnered this like sort of a mass following, and I don't feel like the sort of the crowd sort of that were outside the courtroom and some of the people that were in the courtroom really had much impact as to sort of him as a character, and sort of him wanting to kind of go back to being sort of Arthur Fleck. If anything, Lady Gaga's character, sort of what's her name, Harley Quinn, was more of a representation of that, of like someone that was like a super fan of him and was kind of like was trying to do sort of anything to kind of like be around him and try to like manipulate him. And she had more of an effect in terms of like kind of like reigniting his like confidence, sort of from where he was like a bit of a broken man again at the start of the movie, to then inspire him to kind of like see his like potential to feel like the Joker again. But it just feels like that aspect of sort of this online discourse or whatever like that could have been represented a little bit better, with sort of having a little bit more involvement of the wider sort of crazy sort of following that he had sort of outside the courtroom. But yeah, it's just like that whole like conversation around the first movie was stupid at the time. It's stupid that it was sort of kind of like brought into this movie, and then we're then left with a stupid movie as a result of it. And just to kind of like add to my point, essentially in terms of like kind of like showing him sort of it being an example. I understand like the Joker kind of like being a persona for him to sort of kind of like cope with sort of with life and cope with some of the trauma that's going on, but then it should have kind of been shown throughout the movie that he's kind of created this sort of this cult like following that's kind of like outgrown him, and it's kind of like gotten a little bit more sort of perversive, or like sort of kind of like worse than what he'd initially like even like I don't think he even like imagined having like a cult like following. It would have been great to see him kind of have to sort of deal with and come to terms with like this movement that's kind of like outgrown him, and then seeing sort of the impact of like the persona. So again, like the courtroom scene with like Gary, who was the one person that was like nice to Arthur, but then he's terrified of the Joker person that he's like that he eventually kind of like become, and he's then kind of seeing the negative aspects of of the change that he's made, or the negative aspect of this this movement that he's created essentially. I feel like that should have been maybe like shown more in this movie, and I get like maybe Harley Quinn in some ways is kind of like a bit of a representation of that, but it just kind of there was a better way to tell the story in this for me essentially.
I mean that was in the movie, right? Like, so there's crowds outside the courtroom, there's people in like in the galleries, whatever you call that, like in the audience, and they treat it like a spectacle. Lee is very much a representation of a person who got inspired by him and who has very specific idea of who and what he is, and gets upset when he doesn't live up to that. And then there's the guy in the end who is in prison with him. I don't see his name right now, but the guy who kind of idolizes him and then ends up stabbing him in revenge because he's upset that Arthur is not living up to the legend, right? So there is this idea that the Joker cult has developed a life of its own, and Arthur is not in charge of it.
Mm-hmm. But then, in terms of like the direct impact of like it on him as a character, I feel like the only like real impact that was felt on him was Harley. Like everything else was kind of like background noise and didn't have any apart from obviously the guy stabbing him at the end of the movie, to then eventually become the actual real Joker, which we can have a discussion about the choice of that as well. But I don't feel like any of that was really felt like while I was watching the movie, apart from again like Harley and like her inspiration in terms of like establishing his confidence in himself and re-establishing this other side of him as the Joker in this movie.
So I've got a question. So not having seen the first movie, in other reviews I've seen it said that the first movie makes it very clear that Joker is not a separate personality, right? That the Joker is kind of like a persona that Arthur uses to be himself and to be free of kind of the constraints of society, right? But it's still him. And this movie makes it very clear that they are different people and one is in charge at different times. Is that correct? Like, is that how it goes in the first movie? And is this essentially a retcon of what the Joker is?
Yeah, this is a massive retcon of what the Joker is. The first movie is just like a series of like events that kind of like keep pushing him, making him a little bit more radical and a little more Joker-like in the first movie. And it's very clear by the end of the first movie that there isn't a split personality. This is who he's become because of the events that transpired in that first movie. So again, this is very much like a huge retcon. And like again, like the start of the movie, I can partly understand what they're trying to do in terms of he's now in prison, he's in a complete different environment, and maybe he's been beat down like by the system that he's in, because he's like this kind of like famous celebrity inmate that they have, and of course the guards are going to give him like extra special attention and extra kind of like maybe special punishment because of like who he was. So that like kind of like bringing him back down to the Arthur level, I can kind of understand it, even though I don't completely agree with the choice that they made with that.
You know what? Surprisingly, I don't have a problem with Arthur not actually being the Joker. I actually think that's actually interesting that the progression of that story would have led to him pretty much being a gimmick, because that's the type of influence Joker had. I'm assuming like he had it's not even I'm assuming he did have that type of influence where everyone wanted to be like him. Even the train scene in Joker 1 where everyone was wearing the mask, like you didn't know who was Joker. So kind of like the progression and storyline for him to end up not being the real Joker, I actually think that's pretty smart. I actually think that's a very good route to go. It's just the way that they did it. The way that they did it was, like I said, like Joker 1 had a message. Joker 1 had something to say. like pretty much different thoughts on the human experience, right? Whereas this one, not so much. Even though it tried to say that this is not really the real Arthur, he's just a gimmick. I understand that, but it's just the way that they did it. It wasn't it. Like it felt flat, man, and there just wasn't anything about this one that could make you resonate with the character, especially Joker's character. I understand I haven't made
That's
some
the
of the way.
point. That's the point. The point is to denigrate Arthur for
Yeah,
2
I
hours.
understand.
That's
I
the
understand.
entire movie.
I understand. That's the point, and that's the wrong choice. It's the wrong choice. I don't get. Like, I still find it very hard to believe. Like, I understand maybe we're joking or we're just exaggerating that that was Todd Phillips' intention, but at the same time, it doesn't make. I don't understand how he thought this would have gone well with the public.
It doesn't go well with the audience of the first Joker movie, the one that shows up to watch this movie. It goes over well with everybody who disliked the first Joker, but they are not going to show up and buy tickets. So to me, the real big question is, why did they spend $200 million on this exercise? Because the first movie made $1 billion, and so it was inevitable that there would be a sequel. Right? There's no world in which you don't make a sequel to a $1 billion movie. And I imagine Todd Phillips essentially said, well, we didn't have any plans for any sequel, but either I'm going to do it myself, or somebody else will take my thing and turn it into something I don't like. And he went with the option where he essentially made a refutation to the first movie. I can follow that thought process just fine. The only real question I have is, why did they spend $200 million on this? Because the break-even point is reported to be around 450 million, and by doing this, they're essentially losing money on purpose, right? There's no way in which this finds an audience that's worth $450 million, because the audience that they have, they don't want, and the audience that they would need for this to be profitable doesn't exist. So I don't understand why they even greenlit this under these conditions, unless Todd Phillips just lied to everybody about what this was, maybe. I don't know. But that's, to me, the mystery. I understand why he wanted to do this. I don't understand why they let him.
It was advertised as it was going to still be like Joker 1. So it was like they were trying to retain the current audience, but at the same time, this movie is really for a new audience, which is foolish. Honestly, foolish. And I wouldn't say he deserves obviously the scrutiny that he's receiving, but the movie deserves the scrutiny that he's receiving, because he sold us all a dream, he sold us all a lie, and it looks like, and I think it might be a thing where I wouldn't go to the lengths to say that he lied to Warner Bros, but to be fair, Daniel, like a lot of these film production companies make creative decisions which is baffling to us. Like freaking Disney, they're notorious for this when it comes to obviously the Marvel stuff that they're dropping. So,
and there's some of that, right? But it's more like, at this budget, it needs to be it needs to have mass appeal. It needs to not take too many risks. It needs to have a large audience that this appeals to. And if the point of the exercise is to essentially be an admonishment of your existing audience, like, I understand this if this is like your $20 million, $30 million passion project or something like that, right? Like then you can do what you want, right? Then a studio will just eat the cost and it's fine, but not to the tune of 200 million. So what I'm really interested in is how was this sold to the studio, and what was the studio's thought process in being okay with this? Like, why was he not fired and replaced by somebody who makes something more in line with what the audience wanted? That's to me what's interesting.
Like, again, for me, I think I mentioned in the initials on the part of the review was that we didn't get enough Joker in this sort of movie at all. And sort of when he was kind of doing Jokerish stuff was in his fantasy, especially like the courtroom scene when he's like bashing the judge's head with a hammer. That's all in a fantasy. It's not really happening in real life. And it's pretty weird to have the sort of the first movie where you go through the story and he eventually becomes the Joker in the end, and you like to compare it to like other like comic book type movies. You wouldn't go from like Spider-Man in the first movie where he takes time to become Spider-Man, and then in the second movie he then loses his suits and like loses his power, and then
That's Spider-Man 2.
Does he lose his power? Spider-Man 2. I was thinking he actually lost his
was
power.
it 3? I forget
I-
now. It's been a while, but there is one where he loses his powers. Yeah.
there is when we lose power, but essentially what I'm saying is that it's very rare that that's probably bad example I use, but it's very
So
rare.
taking away the hero's powers is a thing that's done in superhero movies. Yeah. But first of all, this is not a superhero movie. Like
Yeah.
even if you like
It's a comic book
from clips, it looks like the first one is closer to the source material in the sense of it feels more like Gotham City, and there's a whole bunch of Heath Ledger Joker in his performance that is just absent from this. But this has no trace of anything comic book, superhero, anything related to that.
Yeah, DC aren't even, they don't claim it as well.
There's a little bit of window dressing, right? It does not matter at all that the prison is Arkham. It does not matter that the prosecuting attorney is Harvey Dent. It's the fact that he's the Joker and Lee is Harley Quinn does not matter. Like that, I would argue they aren't, right, in the first place. But even if you grant that they are the same characters, like they are so far removed that they are, like, you could tell the same story with just regular people. There's nothing about this that requires this to be Gotham City or the Joker or anything else.
Daniel, what I find interesting, right? Because you said that the movie itself is not a bad film when it comes to the story.
I'll die on that hill. I think it's a very well made movie.
I'm asking story wise.
So I mean, this, like, you have, I think with the story, it's about.
You didn't feel like it was jerky, as in like. Sorry,
I don't think so. I think it was very well crafted. Like the entire thing is essentially reality catching up with Arthur Fleck, right? Like he's faced with the consequence. He has to look in his victims in the eye. He realizes what a fantasy the Joker was. He basically gets treated like he's put in the ultimate. Like the first movie was about him breaking through the restraints of society, and being in prison is the ultimate restraint of society, right? So all of the events of the movie, what they might call the plot, is about him being in that situation and getting worse and worse, and him getting beaten down again and again until he finally completely gives up the Joker persona, right? And I think that entire process is really well done. Like I actually enjoyed, like, scene to scene. I really enjoyed how the movie flowed, how it was acted, how it was written. I think there's a whole bunch of symbolism going on. Like, for example, his makeup. In the last half hour, the state of his makeup is a reflection of his mental state and stuff like that. Like, all of that is very deliberate, and I think like it's well acted. I think this performance, like Joaquin Phoenix's performance, is great, just on a skill level, right? Like, leaving completely aside whether I enjoyed what was happening, but just from a standpoint of, is this a well-made movie? My answer is definitely yes.
So you enjoyed the musicals?
Again, they are not a music. It's not like you're watching Hamilton. It's not a musical in that sense. There's a bunch of scenes where they're singing, and that's it.
Towards like the middle of the movie, it became frequent. Like where I liked it was like the very first one that they did, where they're talking about like Arthur possibly receiving the death sentence, and he's like kind of like watching it in the screen, but then he's just had this interaction with Harley. So like he's again like gone up in this fantasy world where she's like all that kind of like matters to him in that particular moment, no matter what's kind of like going on with like sort of the whole death sentence or whatever like that. He kind of feels like he's like found someone that essentially loves him, especially with like how that ties into the first movie where you saw it in the court scene where like his neighbor, like who they only had that one interaction, but he created this whole like kind of like love story between them in sort of the first movie, which turned out to be like in the sci fantasy. So in that scene it worked. In others, it just kept feeling like they were just like singing for the sake of singing. And again, like where I felt it probably got in the way of the story the most, or got in the way of like seeing the most, was when they were doing the present interview with some of the TV reporter, and it was like kind of like being broadcasted to the world essentially, and they're having like this discussion, and you can see like Arthur being like more and more sort of agitated, more and more sort of kind of like upset about like the line of questions and like kind of like where the interview's going, this, that, and the other. And then he breaks out into a song, and I'm just like I don't want to watch this. Like, I genuinely don't want to watch this. Like, whether it's a musical, whether it's not, whether it's like whatever, it's been like the story's been interrupted, or what, like the scene's been interrupted by singing, and it's just like it was just like a very jarring experience. So
literally,
like
and that's
like how it like ties into like his trauma, and that also kind of like ties into the first movie as well. So like Jonathan, if you remember when he kills the three guys in the subway, and he kind of like runs into like this like bathroom. And then he's in there and he just kind of like does this like dance. He does like this like interpretive dance like to himself. And again, that's like a response to trauma. And the reason it works in that movie is because you're just like, you feel bad for the guy. You feel sympathy for him, and it's not something that's like constantly kind of like interrupting the story. Whereas like it felt like in this like, and it's really funny. Like one of the like last scenes between like the Joker and Harley Quinn is she's starting to sing and he's telling her like stop singing, and I genuinely felt like that in the movie. I was like, please stop flipping singing in this movie, man.
Just that's what I'm saying, because now, Daniel, I understand why you like the film is because you could tolerate, like, you didn't see the musicals as interruptions, and which, by the way, I'm not here to crucify you for liking the movie. No, no,
Sure.
no. But because I was just confused on, like, because it felt like you agreed with us, but at the same time you didn't, because you said it was a good story. So that's not clear. You made it clear anyways. But now I understand, because
Yeah.
now I know your reason for it. So I think a lot of people's reasoning is they saw the music, like the music scenes, as interruptions when it came to nail biting moments, and that's how
And
I viewed it as
I
well.
didn't think that was the case. I thought they always spoke to his state of mind, right? That was always his reaction. So it is true that they don't further the plot, and it is true that not much, like the plot pauses for the music, right? And if somebody, like, I'm not a musical guy, I barely listen to music. It's not like the music is an appeal to me. I just recognized how these were not random injections into the plot just to fill time. They were there to kind of speak to. So it's either about why he has a mental break in that situation, and also what fantasy he fills that break with, right? This whole thing about having a game show with Lee, for instance, right? Like, that's a fantasy, and then his worry that he might not be able to trust her manifests as her shooting him in that fantasy, right? So, like, there was always something that didn't further the plot, but that spoke to what was on his mind and where his mind went to deal with whatever was happening in the real world. I don't think it's filler. I don't think it's bad. I think it's a creative choice, and a lot of people don't like it. I understand that, and I'm kind of indifferent to it. I just think it was there deliberately, and it was saying something about the character in that moment.
I think it's because of the contrast, because Arthur's dark, right? And the situation that he's in is dark. Whereas when the music comes in, it's very light and it's very bright. Do you know what I'm saying? It's very vibrant. So it's like the two for me just didn't mesh well. It didn't.
Yeah, well, it's an escape. Like, that's the whole thing, right? He gets told, like, one of the musical sequences happens when he finds out that the state is pursuing the death penalty, right? And he can't handle that because that's the first time it really gets real. Up until this point, he probably thought he'll probably walk away at some point. He'll spend some time in prison, might be a long time, but eventually he'll be free. And this is the first time where he is really confronted with the idea that may not be true. And so that is where he starts singing, because, and it's not just that he starts singing, right? It's also that it deflects from what's going on, right? He doesn't have to deal with it right now. And also in his fantasy, he is popular and liked by being an entertainer, right? I understand that doesn't gel with the first movie where he was a comedian primarily, and here he's a performer, but he's still performing, and in his fantasy, he's still liked as a performer. And so whenever he feels alone or he feels threatened, he retreats into a fantasy in which he is liked and celebrated.
And I understand and I agree, but his conveyal in Escape was way better in Joker 1 than Joker 2, because in Joker 1, it was more creating a scenario. And even though that scenario was a better scenario, as in, like, it was, it was kind of like, you could say it was light in a way, as in, like, just pretty much it was a better situation that he's currently in. It was still kind of dark, because it was still, you could still feel sad for him, because, like, damn, like, this guy's creating a whole scenario where
the context makes it sinister.
Do you get what I'm saying? So it's still
actually singing itself, and the performance is light, but that contrast is there on purpose as well, right?
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I hear it. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I just
so I'm not really defending the movie exactly, but I think a lot of the criticisms are misplaced, and not specifically yours, but we're recording this on the Tuesday. For 4 days, I've been seeing a lot of the time against my will, people's opinions about this movie, and a lot of them are just kind of off the mark, right? Like saying that the music is just filler. No, it's not. It speaks to his state of mind, for example, or like there is nothing going on in the plot, and no, actually, it's a systematic beating down of Arthur where reality catches up with him. That's what it's about. You can dislike all of these things, and I definitely did not have a good time watching this. I'm just pointing out that these things are their own purpose, and they are, with like, given what they're trying to do, they're quite well done. And I would have much preferred it if that talent and effort and time and resources had gone to something that's more enjoyable to watch. But that is not what anybody involved wanted to make, and we kind of have to deal with that, regardless of what we thought of the first movie.
So this is why I'm a bit confused as well. So you didn't have a good time watching it. What about it didn't you enjoy? Because you said what you
Because
did
it's
enjoy
so
in terms
cynical and mean-spirited. Like,
Okay.
he's burning his character in effigy because he doesn't like what it's become. That's what's happening. Like, we don't even have to talk about the last 15 minutes, which...
Oh, the last 15 minutes. Guys, sorry. Sorry to interject. The bombing scene honestly didn't make sense to you. But sorry, carry on, Daniel.
I'm not talking about that.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
talking
Well,
about what happens
that's for me
after
personally.
the trial.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to
And
go into
like,
it?
that's one of the grimmest things I've seen in a movie in a long time, especially like a mainstream one. Like, it's like he comes. I don't remember exactly. Like, I remember exactly what I think he trash talks his guards in an interview, maybe, or in his final statement. I think it's in his final statement.
Yeah.
And then he comes back to the guards, essentially dragging him off to a remote part where they brutally assault him, throw him in an isolation cell, and the one person who comes to his defense is beaten to death within earshot. And Arthur just has to lie there and deal with it. And there's nowhere for him to go, and there's nothing for him to do. And that's how. And that's not even the end. The end is where he gets set up to be lured away from other people, from watching eyes, and then a guy just shanks him and just lets him bleed out on the ground. Like, that's how this movie ends, and that's the culmination of the humiliation.
Do you think that was a
And I'm pulling my punches for YouTube's sake. Like this is like
Yeah.
this doesn't even fully represent just how mean-spirited this thing is.
you think that
And
scene was
just every part of this movie, it just keeps beating him down, and by association, it beats down the people who like the character.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So that was pretty much their way. It was a slap in the face to the right wing incels, pretty much. I
Basically.
assume there was no inkling that there was gonna be scenes like the ending, because that's why I thought it was a bit random. The way it was like, okay, so everything seemed a bit like real in terms of like just realism, right? For me, that's why I felt a bit inconsistent. Cause I was like,
There's lots of inconsistencies in this movie. Shall we talk about how the movie's message is basically, if you step out of line, we're gonna beat you down until you know your place, but we're not actually going to give you a better way, right? Like at no point in this movie. So the entire thing about the movie is, in the first movie, Arthur and his followers essentially kind of erupted in this riot, right? Where they essentially set fire to the city, right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how it basically comes across as, right? And the entire thing is about society has been beating us down, and so we no longer feel any need to abide by its rules, because then they're only there to keep us down, right? That's kind of one of the things that's in the first movie, right? And the second movie is essentially about the consequences of that catching up with Arthur, right? He's in prison, he's at the mercy of the guards, he's in the justice system, and he has to kind of prostrate himself before the system for mercy, right? He has to argue that he was insane, that he is better now, and all of these things, right? And the guards humiliate and brutalize and abuse him on a daily basis. And so he and his followers are essentially being punished for having stepped out of line, right? But at no point does anybody show how they should have acted, right? Their punishment is not that they chose the wrong path, it's that they resisted in the first place. So at the same time, this movie is tearing down and denigrating Arthur, right? And everything he stands for. But at the same time, it doesn't show what he should have done, like where his mistake was. It does not argue that, oh, actually, Arthur should have done this and this and this, and then he would have had a better life, and it's his fault for choosing violence instead. The movie does not make a case for what a better way is. It only punishes like disobedience, essentially. That's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah, it just pretty much feels like it's just a film for justice, as in like justice for those that felt offended.
It's the system punishing people who step out of line.
Yeah.
Right? But that's kind of how it's perceived by Arthur, right? And you might think that if this is a refutation of that perception that Arthur is like this noble resistance leader or whatever, right? Or the leader of the downtrodden and whatever, then if you make a movie about showing how that is wrong, then maybe you should show what they should be doing with their lives, how they could have better lives and stuff like that without resorting to violence and without killing people randomly and without breaking the law. But nothing like that happens. It's just purely contempt for Arthur.
Yeah.
Like on the movie's part. I'm
No.
not talking about plot. I'm not talking about any characters in there. That's what drives the entire thing.
I agree.
I think that is very mean-spirited and very gross. And that's the part that made me uncomfortable. Like, I'm kind of okay with a movie that says this is a bit like Aragorn's tax policy, right, from Game of Thrones. Like you have these genre conventions. In fantasy, that's the rightful king who defeats the evil wizard, whatever. And in superheroes, it's the good guys with powers catch the bad guys with powers, and that's how you solve all problems. And then I think you can tell a story about what happens after. If a villain actually gets caught by the law and actually gets treated according to the law, what will actually happen to them when their costumes and their antics and their rhetoric is stripped away, what's left of them. That, like, you could, in theory, have a really interesting movie about this. But you can do this in a way that's not mean-spirited. That does not simply seek to beat down its protagonist, but actually offer something more positive. And this movie offers nothing positive.
No, I agree. It was just one point of view that they were showing. And like I said, it was just for justice. They're just trying to say, listen, let's just clean up the mess that we made with Joker 1, even though I don't feel like there was a mess. Cool. Like there's going to be a group of radicals.
Thousands of people rioting in the streets and killing people more or less at random is a mess.
Yeah. No, yeah. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that was definitely it was a terrible approach, the wrong approach. And I just wonder to be fair, this is the end. So I was gonna say, where do they go from now? But there's nothing. Like, it's finished. Like,
that's the point. That they can't take it anywhere else. The Joker is dead, and that's it.
Well, they did try to kind of birth a new Joker with the guy that like stabbed him, and he had like the kind of like the joke that he told, and like the little laugh, and then he was like kind of carving his face, which was, I actually found out today, was done in
the Batman movie.
Yeah, because Christopher Nolan apparently had requested that there wasn't any like face carvings to obviously kind of like preserve Heath Ledger's sort of legacy and his sort of his like sort of representation of the Joker, and it was supposedly cut out of the first movie, but then included in the second movie after Christopher Nolan had left Warner Brothers and didn't have like the same kind of like leverage of power. So that was kind of done in this case, and it then kind of like brings it back to the point of well. I kind of like, I think you said you liked it, Jonathan, about like you liked the idea of like this all this kind of chaos like birthing a potential like Joker down the line. But for me, it's just like it was like the last like nail in the coffin of like Daniel's been saying, is that you've just like been kind of like shitting on this character and shitting on him like him as a person throughout the entire movie, and then to then have it at the very end as this isn't even the Joker anyways, like who cares, like this isn't even the Joker, the real Joker is like kind of like this person that like has been created from this. But by that point I was so fed up. I was so annoyed with the movie for even like making that choice. And if it was done in a better movie, and if it was done in a better way, then I could have like accepted the decision. So it's not that they chose for someone else to be it, it's just like the way it unfolded and the combination of the events that led to it, that I was just a bit like,
that's my point though.
It rubbed me the wrong way completely.
But that was my point though. Literally, it was like I enjoyed, like I found it interesting, and I actually liked the concept or the storyline of that being pretty much a gimmick. And the reason why I enjoyed that is because of Joker 1 in the train scene where there's like this, everyone wants to be Joker. So I was like, okay, that follows on from that, and that's very interesting. But pretty much what you just said was my point, is that it's just the way that it was executed was terrible. I don't know, man. I don't know what else to say. I don't want to keep reading this BS that I watched, but
the only like I will say like the interesting part that was in this was like the whole like kind of like identity of like sort of Arthur and the Joker, and like sort of who actually is sort of like the person that everyone kind of like loves in terms of like the following, and sort of like Harley Quinn as well in all of this, in terms of like he genuinely thought that she had feelings and had like this emotional connection with him as Arthur, but it was all like a fantasy. It was like all sort of like a fantasy. It was like she sort of had this like perfect image of him and like his like ideal self, or like his sort of perceived self, essentially that she like kind of like fell in love with, and in the moment that he kind of like denounced the Joker and like said that the Joker didn't exist and like kind of like fell back to the Arthur character, and then she essentially like kind of like walked away from him and sort of just kind of like disowned him essentially, and like with the whole like him and stuff like that, it would have been great to like fully like take a deeper exploration of that throughout the movie, as opposed to this humiliation ritual that we did for the entire movie.
And also, I will like to add, what I did also like was they did continue with the theme of pretty much the world not loving you, because they pretty much love.
Nobody cares about Arthur.
Yeah, literally, and they continue.
Like Lee is in love with the Joker, and when she realizes he's not what she thought he was, she just leaves. And his fans don't care about him as a person at all. They're just there for the entertainment. So I think there's stuff in here about like celebrity and like high profile court cases, and like serial killers have groupies on the outside who love them from a distance. And there's all sorts of, it touches on all sorts of ideas, but it's not interested in actually building on like the mythos of this character, like from this angle, right? It's not really telling a story about how maybe the Joker idea is kind of has developed a life of his own, for example, right? That could be interesting. It's mentioned and it shows up in a few places, but it doesn't really drive a story, right? It's not like there's now 20 Jokers out there and they're all doing random stuff and Arthur has no control over any of them, but he's still being held accountable, for example, right? So you can imagine things you could have done in good faith with this idea. Just before we move on, how many people walked out of your theaters?
I had a couple walk out. So two people. I was going to say a couple. Two people walked out about halfway through, and then about 15 minutes before the end of the movie, one extra person walked out the movie theater.
To be fair with me, it was none, but because I watched it on Friday, so I think people are more inclined to walk out on, like, I think the early on a Sunday. So I think people are more inclined to walk out on Sunday because obviously they're seeing the reaction from social media, so that could have influenced also, to their decision too. So for me, I don't think there was any. But there was like a few people that were going out and then they came back after quite a long time. Not a long time, but it was quite a while after they came back. So I don't know, maybe they could have gone to the toilet, but I think it's because there was a time where I even went out as well. I didn't want to go back in. So yeah, no one left my one. But that was on the day it actually came out, day of its release.
So I had 7. So 7 people just walked out, didn't come back.
What day did you go? Saturday or Sunday?
Sunday.
Okay.
Which, like, I actually thought it was the opposite of what you just said. I thought if you're seeing this on day one and you don't know what's coming, then you may be more shocked by what it is, right? But by Sunday, surely people have heard at least some things. But even then, towards the end of the weekend, people, like, I still had people walk out. Like, I don't know if they didn't think it would be that bad, or if they thought like if they just hadn't heard, whatever. But yeah, 7 people, which is a little over. It was maybe 50 people to start with, and so 7 out of those left.
Do you know what? I think that is that on the Friday, people are like having their first experience of the movie, and because of the first movie and because like people loved it so much, is that even if it's going in the direction that they're not completely happy with, they're kind of like waiting to see if it's like tied up in a way that kind of like makes sense and works. Yeah. But by Sunday, when you're hearing how bad it is and everyone's saying how bad it is, and then you're in there and you're experiencing how bad it is, you're probably not expecting it to recover towards the end of the movie. So you're just be like, okay, let me just like take my time back. Essentially, it's how. Yeah. Obviously, I'm not in the people's heads. I don't know what they were thinking, but that's probably why you had more walkouts on the Sunday on your side than Jonathan on the Friday.
It's possible. It's also just one showing, right? So, but I've heard a lot about walkouts, and like that just goes towards like the people who actually showed up for this movie are not buying what this movie is selling. And even after the showing, I made a point to walk out slowly and kind of listen to people's conversations, and they just didn't get it. They thought this was a normal movie. And even after over 2 hours of this, they did not really understand what it was that they were seeing. They kept waiting for the movie to become like a movie, as opposed to like a statement by the director. And I don't know how you can be that dense, but okay. Like honestly, it's not subtle, right? It's not like you don't need to dig through 5 layers of symbolism to get to the message, right? It's very in your face. But like the vast, like every conversation I heard, was very much like disbelief, or like what did we just see, like, and why didn't they just make a normal movie? So yeah, I think this movie is not finding an audience, shall we say?
But I think that's because a lot of them, they don't really know the backstory of anything that's going on.
Yeah.
I don't think they even know what the hell the impact Joker 1 had in terms of like the right insults and stuff. So they're just going off what's being presented to them, which is the trailer and Joker 1. So they're like, okay, Joker 1 was like this, and the trailer is pretty much similar to Joker, you know what I'm saying, Joker 1. So that's what we're expecting. And then
Yep.
they come to see, a film with a lot of music scenes in it, like, what the hell? So I get what you're saying. It makes sense. Like, from our perspective, like, how can people be so dense? But that's because we know what's going on behind the scenes. We know, well, I would say, well, we've done a bit more research than these people. Their research is just the trailer. So
yeah, but it's not like I followed the production process of this. Like I had heard the occasional thing.
Yeah.
Right.
No. Yeah.
No. I mean, I'm not attacking anybody specifically. It's more like this, like, if this was supposed to send a message to this movie's audience, that message was not received, as far as I can tell. Yeah. And this kind of gets filed under just another trash movie, and Hollywood doesn't know how to make movies and stuff like that. I've not seen one person actually be introspective about this. And I'm not saying it should be, but I'm just saying, if the goal of this movie is kind of a wake-up call for people who took the wrong message from Joker 1, message failed, like task failed, right? Like not a single person is doing that. All it's doing is creating a bunch of ill will.
Yeah, 100%. Felt like it's even fueling it even more, and like the whole on social media trend is, they don't want you to feel pain or whatever, which I agree to an extent, but I don't agree with how they are presented their arguments. So they're pretty much just trying to say attack on the white males that are, who feel pain, etc., etc. Like, I understand, but I don't agree with it. Like, I do agree with the concept that men sometimes aren't allowed to express how they feel when they're when they're like in the low end of the hierarchy system in society, or status in society. So I do understand, because I do feel like that's like in society. Like, if a guy expresses how he feels, a lot of the times it can be misconstrued in a negative way, right? And man, be narcissism, misogyny, or whatever. So I do agree that sometimes, like, men should, like this, I don't want to say the S word, but there's like, look at the rates of that. You know what I'm saying? The S word, like, it. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a huge problem. And I think that's a contribution, because of, like, a lot of the times men can't express the way that they feel for many other reasons. So I do agree with to an extent, but I don't, like I said, I don't agree with those right wingers and the way that they're trying to, like, just their views on, Joker 2. I don't agree with. Yeah, I don't fully agree with that, but I do agree that this film was definitely just a film that was pretty much trying to be a film that was a slap in the face to them, but they don't realize that there was collateral damage. Like, you slapped all of us in the face. You know what I'm saying? The audience, the part of the audience that are pretty much just regular viewers and just love the movie for the film itself. Last thoughts and ratings.
Last thoughts. This was a huge waste. They should have left it as the first movie. We didn't need a second movie. The actor Joaquin Phoenix didn't want to make a second movie. Todd Phillips, I think, said should have been a one-off. It's unfortunate that the first one made $1 billion, because then we ended up having sort of this as the sequel. It just kind of betrayed everyone that like loved the first movie, and then just didn't give me enough of like what I wanted, and that was a Joker movie about the Joker, essentially. So for that, I will give this a 1 out of 10. And like I know Daniel mentioned like it was like kind of like well made and this and the other, but it's just kind of subverted everyone's expectations in the worst way possible for people that love the first movie. And for that's why it gets the 1 out of 10.
Well, like I said, I think this film, it had shades of greatness. And those shades of greatness, they should have made the film like that. I think they should have, like, listen, the film was already packaged great. They tried to repackage it into what they tried to do, I felt insulted, because I think what they tried to do is the functional equivalent of this movie was like, a painting where, those painters that create painting, those BS paintings where they'll just pretty much splash paint, right, on paper, and then they'll make it seem like this is a painting that was created by the gods, is above human understanding. I feel like this is what they tried to do with this movie. And it didn't work. It was a film which they pretty much was like a justice film for people who felt attacked by the right wingers, which flopped as well because not only did you slap them, but you slapped us, like I said before. So it had collateral damage, and the collateral damage was big. It was big. It outweighs the right wingers in their opinions, in my opinion.
Can they do
Sorry,
worse and more in the weekend?
everyone keeps on saying that. Everyone keeps on saying. I don't think, you know what? I don't think it's worse than Madam Web, but I would rather rewatch Morbius than this one, than Joker 2, in my opinion. So it's not worse than Madam Web, but I don't think it's better than Morbius. This crazy Joker 2 actually received in terms of the box office opening weekend is less than Madam Web and Morbius. So I don't know. They need to make they need to make 450 to break evens, and I think they're 121 now or something like that. So yeah, it's
The conversation online is like the conversation online is so bad that like I'm seeing people like just like question, is it worth going? Like I've seen some multiple tweets of people like, is it even like worth going to the cinema to watch this movie? I know I had to drag my brother to go see this with me. He was very much not going to go and see it, and he was very much annoyed at me that he had to spend 2 and a bit hours in the movie, sort of watching the film because I dragged him along with me to go see this.
that is
I think I would have seen it. Yeah, would I have gone to see it? I would have gone to see it if he wasn't doing this. To be honest.
And I do understand that sometimes people just jump on the bandwagon and they just want to jump on the hate train. But I think there's just some movies like this one where it's just not a good movie, man. And you have to understand. I don't think people are actually. I generally don't believe majority of the people that say this movie is bad is because they're jumping on hate train. I generally believe they just don't like the film. So, yeah,
I do see a lot of stuff on autopilot where people just repeat criticisms that don't have very much to do with the movie actually itself, like calling it phoned in and low quality and stuff like that. I think there is a difference between a poorly made movie and a movie you don't like, right? And that is a very simple distinction to make, and a lot of people aren't making it. And so a lot of the discourse is on this movie is quite useless because of that. And people don't seem to kind of appreciate what the director is doing and just rejecting that and just saying, okay, you have a message and I heard the message and I don't care for it. End of discussion. Like, I'm not going to watch your next project because I expect it would be more of the same. Right? That's a reasonable response. But I think people are kind of, it's like, you don't know, you never know. Like when you see a comment online, you never know who it is, right? Could be somebody who's never seen a movie before. It could be somebody who's been watching a movie for 30 years, right? Could be somebody who has intimate knowledge of how movies work. Like, you just don't know, right? But a lot of the comments seem to be recycling the same ideas, like it's poorly made, or it's like Lady Gaga sings bad when obviously that's on purpose, and obviously that's because that's how the character sings, right? And the singing is much better in the fantasy than it is in reality, and all of that is on purpose. And people don't seem to recognize that. And I think that's kind of where I'm coming from when I'm saying, is actually a really well-made movie that has a message that its audience doesn't want to hear and has good reasons for not wanting to hear it. It's not like it's this deeply challenging thing that people really need to hear but are refusing to hear. And so there is nobility in doing this exercise. I think this movie is an exercise in cynicism and mean-spiritedness and cruelty and elitism. And at some point they lost track of the fact that making movies is still a business and it's still for entertainment purposes. And so and what they also lost sight of is that a large chunk of education is seduction, meaning you have to get people to want to listen to you first before you can tell them what you think they need to hear. And that is one of the things that this movie does not understand or doesn't want to understand. It's entirely self-righteous. And for that reason, I give it a watch it in IMAX out of 5.
Sure. All right. Well, yeah, I'm gonna give it a 3.5 out of 10.
Stay at home. Don't go see this. Don't listen to this.
Yeah. No. Honestly, I think there's nothing to see here.
Yeah.
I think this is purely an exercise in narcissism on the part of the person who made it. There's no story here. There's no character here. There's nothing interesting here.
That's the first time I will agree. I don't think I've ever said that before on this channel, but I agree. I would not recommend you guys to go watch this film. I'm sorry, I wouldn't recommend it. I just say wait until it comes on digital, and I'm saying, yeah, this film hurt me, man. Honestly, I think, and that's what it was as well. That's what I think it was. I think, like he said, that it wasn't a poorly made movie. I think people weren't angry that it was a poorly made movie because it was.
Joaquin Phoenix's performance is incredible.
Yeah, it was like that's
like if you just think about what goes into that performance.
Yeah,
like it's very physical. It's very layered. It's very very emotional. It's all of that. It's just not. It doesn't have an audience. Is the point?
Yeah, and this was a film of like
I wouldn't say. I'm sorry. I wouldn't say it doesn't have an audience. It doesn't have an audience when you add the label of the Joker to it, essentially, because we're not there to see the Joker be in that particular situation. We want to see the Joker not do the typical Joker things, because this is not like this is kind of like Elseworlds. There's no Batman, there's no whatever, even though they tried to like slap Harvey Dent in this movie essentially, but there is still
and they did give him like the burns on one side, which is completely pointless because there's nothing about him that's actually Harvey Dent other than the name and the fact that he gets burnt on one side of his face, and that's it.
It's just more. That's just kind of like there for window dressing, more like Easter egg kind of thing. But
it's also the only one, I think. So it's especially pointless. But when I mean it doesn't have an audience, I mean that the people who want to see Joker 2 don't want to see this, and people who want to see this are not going to show up. Right? That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. And I just think the reason why the reaction is the way that is mainly because people are actually genuinely hurt. So it's not that, like you said, it's not that it's a poorly made film, because I don't believe it's a poorly made film. I just think, like you said, this wasn't the film that they wanted to see. And when they did end up seeing this film, they were hurt by it more so than anything. So, all right, guys, thank you very much for watching today's discussion.
Let us know your thoughts down below. Is this the worst movie of the year for you? Or did you see some bright spots in this? Did you enjoy this? If you did, let us know why. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
All right, guys, thank you very much for tuning into today's discussion, and we will catch you next week. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.